Welcome to Almost Grown Up. I'm Lucy, and today in the podcast, I want to talk about questions and why I think they might become our best friends this year. Have you ever had this feeling where you've got excitement and energy for the new year or for the space that you might have to do stuff in, but then you also have a great deal of anxiety, maybe even existential dread about what exactly it is you're going to do and how you're going to spend that time well, and maybe this underlying fear of getting it wrong or choosing the wrong thing and then regretting your decision. But rather than giving yourself permission to not have to make the decision, you feel the stress of picking a thing, because a lot of people around you have a thing that they're doing or working on, a project that they're moving towards, a goal that they're setting for 2026. Resolutions abound, and you're just not 100% sure on what feels right. Or so many different things feel right, you don't know where to focus on. So that was me a few Mondays ago, and I sat down to try and figure that all out. I was chatting to ChatGPT because sometimes I find AI personal assistants just very useful as a feedback for what I am trying to get to. And it provided a direction, obviously, as it would do. And I got a bit excited about that. I started thinking, okay, yeah, maybe this is my kind of like North Star for the year. And then bit by bit, I realized it didn't hold enough. It felt like it was missing quite a lot, and I felt confusion and dread creep back in, and it just felt too neat. AI makes it too neat, I wrote, and ended up back at that place of like, what the F am I doing? So what I've been wondering is, how could we find a playful, wonder-filled solution to this? What would it mean if we set up our years with a lens of play and wonder and curiosity as our guiding principles? And can we still move forward with the things that we want to build more of the life that we want to, using these as our lens and perspective? And what I'm coming towards on my current working theory is that perhaps questions are our exact gateway into that. So come into the blanket fort, let's figure this out. My thinking is that questions offer us a permission slip that resolutions don't, because resolutions are about being really clear and focused on something, whereas questions give us that permission to not 100% know exactly what it is that we want to focus on or exactly where we want to end up once we've done the thing. They are this kind of permission to explore terrain, to give us the space without giving us the actual defined outcome. And I think that is like a huge weight off. I don't know about you when you start to think about that, but for me, my shoulders drop and I feel this like, sigh. So maybe I don't need to have a one defined goal. Maybe I can have a question that will give me permission to explore and figure it out on the way. And I was recently reading this essay book by Rebecca Solnit, No Straight Road Takes You There. And she has a beautiful quote in it, which I think sums it up, that idea, and made me feel like really connected and excited about this idea of using questions and not knowing. And full disclosure, I'm only like 3 essays into this book, but it is a great book. I'm really enjoying it and would recommend picking it up if you can get a copy. And she writes, "For so many of our destinations, no straight road takes us there. The route is over mountains or through forests and beyond what we know. And it may also be through inconceivable beauty and transformation, as well as peril. It may be uncharted or steep, or take decades or centuries to traverse. We may get there through storytelling, alliance, or the appearance of unanticipated participants. That's a declaration of difficulty and uncertainty, but also of possibility that I offer as encouragement to keep going." And in that moment, I felt like Rebecca Solnit was like my own little personal pep talk of, you don't need to have this step by step by step, this like morning routine of that girl, or they're like 75 hard or creative or whatever. You don't need to have that, like, I am doing this specific thing and I am getting up and doing that X, Y, and Z every day in order to move forward to somewhere, in order to discover new things, in order to create what you want to create, in order to move towards the life that you want. Having a general direction and embracing the journey felt like part of it. And it felt like a mini pep talk to say, hey, there might also be wonderful surprises in the fact that you don't know this final destination as the outcome, or you don't have to take that clearly charted path that you think you do to get there. And that actually, if this thing over here seems exciting for a second, you can go on that detour and it might give you things that you didn't expect but are wonderful gifts, whether that's connection with different people, whether that's an understanding of yourself, whether that's a new project or a new idea or a new experience that you can take forward with you. And that big permission slip that I think question gives us felt like, okay, this could be a tool to use. This could be something here. And so I was thinking about it more. And I also realized it's like a creative constraint, in that questions provide us this space to explore. They provide us a kind of terrain to cover, ground to move over, but it's wide. I guess they don't constrict it too much. And I was reading a couple of Substacks on creative constraint, and in one of them, this woman was talking about this idea that actually you need something to push back against. And let me get the quote. She writes, "There is a persistent myth that creativity is spontaneous, unpredictable, and best left to inspiration. In reality, the opposite is true. Creativity scales only when it's grounded in structure. That's because freedom without constraint is not liberating, it's paralyzing." And this felt like, oh, what she's onto here is this idea that we don't need to know the full outcome, the full final direction, the full final, like, pinpoint on Google Maps where we're going, for example, in this like metaphor of travel. But you do need to have a boundary, right? You do need to have a, like, we're going northwest here, or like we're going to this part, or we're heading in that direction, because without it, you stay standing, I guess, in that existential dread, which is what I was feeling last Monday of like, which direction do I go? I could go in any of them. And that is paralyzing. It's not liberating, or at least my experience of it is that. So I want to interrupt myself here, because I think what I was trying to get at with this idea of constraint in the question is that, yes, the question gives us that direction. It gives us kind of the outline of where we're going, but also gives us those boundaries to say, like, this is in and this isn't in, because a question can present us with this shape, with this outline. And if we embrace that as a guiding tool to say, like, does that actually help me answer that question? Is that helping me explore this terrain? It's much easier to say yes or no to things that might come towards us that could feel like interesting exploration, or a shiny penny, or just something else that we get thrown our way, and we kind of trying to figure out, is that something I want to pursue or explore? Is that a direction I want to go in? And it can be helpful to use that question as a sense check, right? That becomes our boundary to say, like, hey, I wanted to explore this question. We wanted to explore this question. Like, does that fit in? Like, can that be part of it? And sometimes we might surprise ourselves by being able to say, like, yes, like 100%, that could be part of it. I'd never thought about, I don't know, being healthy in this way. Like, I'd never thought, actually, for example, let's say a usual resolution might be for us to be healthier. Like, I feel that's a standard one that everybody always says, right? And instead, we might realize that health for us is about energy, having more energy. It's like, what would having energy feel like? What are the things that make me feel energy? What feels energetic to me? That could be a question. And we might find that in trying to answer that question, we discover a whole load of things that don't fit into the, like, do the exercise, eat the food, go to bed at the right time. Those things might fit in as well, but there could be other stuff that we would otherwise miss. But without the question, there's no boundary to kind of say what's in and what's out. And we get back to this place of being paralyzed. So that's what future Lucy wanted to say to past Lucy, and now to you. Let's go back to me before. And as we go, by practicing the art of asking questions, we can keep that connection to ourselves. Because I think that's the other part of it, is you can be moving in a general direction, but needing that feedback of like, is this still where I want to be going? Is this giving me what I am expecting it to? Is there something else there that I want to explore? And I think that's the freedom to actually consider ourselves an active participant in our lives. And questions allow us to do that. They give us that power, that feedback, that self-connection, that self-understanding. And I've practiced this quite a lot with journaling. I don't know about you, if you found this with kind of journaling practices, that the more you sit down and you write an answer to a question, the more there is a sense of understanding where you are, what you're thinking about, what is important. I think that's one of the reasons, like Julia Cameron's Artist's Way, which I think a lot of people know about. If you don't know about it, it's worth checking it out. But one of the practices she has is morning pages, with the idea that if you turn up to a page and write a lot, you'll probably write some questions and you'll probably find some answers to those questions in those pages. And that self-knowledge is really important feedback as we traverse journeys that aren't necessarily the structure that everybody else is following or doing. Because I think that's where this comes in. You don't have that same existential dread if you're following a well-laid out path. You have the existential dread and confusion when you are cutting your way through a forest that you're building. Like, the path isn't in front of you, you're building it as you go. And I think having those questions as our guide, as our toolkit, could be a really helpful way to keep us in a sense of equilibrium, a sense of not feeling super anxious and confused all of the time, which feels interesting because when I think about questions initially, I was like, well, surely that just opens room for ambiguity and confusion more. And if things are questionable, maybe that's quite anxiety inducing, which is what I want to talk about now, in that I wanted to test out on a small scale before I dive into this whole, like, I think questions are the working theory for the year. What could they do for me in that moment, in that week? And so the experiment I run was to pick 5 questions, and I was going to take a question on a walk with me each day. So every day I go and do the same walk to pick my son up from nursery. And so it's a well-known path. I know I don't need to check a map. I don't need to worry about doing or interacting with anything on the way necessarily. I could just kind of walk and have that question with me. It's like taking a question out on a date. That's like the most exciting my life is right now. I think it's exciting, hey? Although it doesn't sound it. And so I picked a different type of question each day because I wanted to see if I did that, what my energy was like afterwards, and if it shifted my mood. So I wanted to share a little bit about that experiment because I think there are a few nuggets from that we can take forward to how we might approach question building this year for ourselves. So day 1, I asked myself, like, what would it be? What would I see? How would I approach this if today was an advent calendar? And that walk was super interesting. I'll share some of the audio that I took from it. It's been interesting because I think I'm in a better mood because of the idea of asking questions has got me quite excited. Yeah, the walk has just made me notice lots of things. I actually think it's a really nice little gateway into wonder. You see the person with the awesome outfit that you think, like, it's just banging, like, great outfit, oranges and lights flickering and baubles and all the Christmas decorations in the shop. Could feel like quite a grey day because it is actually very grey. Has felt a bit more interesting, but I did feel myself being like, oh, is this a good enough question? Should I be asking other questions? Is it transformative enough? Like, expecting somehow that it would solve everything in one walk. It has definitely given me some energy and opened up a few little nice, warm, cozy moments of feeling energetic, and I'm just going to try and extend it throughout the day and see what else I noticed. But what really came out of that, right, was this sense of being in the moment, being in the present, and just opening into wonder, which I think has been an exciting takeaway from that the more I asked the questions, the more good things I saw, the more wonderful things I saw, the more I felt a sense of wonder and play. And it's something I've talked about before, but it was just so visible to me on that walk that as soon as I asked the question, I was just there and I was watching and engaging in a way that I don't usually on that walk. And even more interesting when I compare it to day 2, where I asked a different question, which is, what if I was exactly where I needed to be? And I don't know about you, but that question, the moment I asked myself it, I didn't even need to start the walk. I was just like, you know, that feeling when you like get into a warm bath, or like you tuck yourself into bed and after a long day and just like, oh, do you know what? Maybe it's all going to be okay. Which I think is a lovely feeling to have. And if you can just ask yourself a question and you get to that, like that feels like a superpower. So I was really excited by that question, and I'll share a little bit of what came out of that walk now.
In comparison to yesterday, like I was way more in my head, didn't notice anywhere near as much of what was going on around me as I was walking. But it was really useful to start to think of like, okay, what would I be grateful for? And I think that sense of like not trying to push too hard and letting myself relax at points. I have this feeling that I can miss out so much on the day-to-day of my life while I'm trying to build this dream life, but actually life is happening right now. But yes, definitely made me feel a little bit more relieved, a little bit more relaxed.
And then on day 3, I was like, okay, maybe I'll try this similar type of question. And I asked, what is enough? And spoiler alert, didn't love it. It did not give me anywhere near what I thought it was going to do. Interestingly, asking what is enough made me worry about not having done enough. And instead of this like really nice in the moment walk I'd had on Monday, on Wednesday I was so in my head and stressing and maybe walking even faster and just in a bit of that like productivity mode, which is interesting for a question that I'd chosen to be a sort of like decentering of productivity, a permission slip to just do less. But that's not how that question felt for me.
To be honest, I didn't love this question. Like, I think it, in one way, it's really useful to be like, okay, to clarify. But to be honest, it got me more in the realm of like thinking of all the things that I could do or should do. And it was hard for me to find a way to say like, this was enough. Is that okay to rest? Type question. In terms of like an immediate shift in like mood or perspective, I don't know if it really delivered.
Then on the next day, I had a complete 180 and we went down to an absolute banger of a question, which was, what is delightful or what feels delightful? And if I was gonna like give you the advice to try any one of these questions, that would be the one I would give you the advice to try, because I just had like the 100% lifted my mood. I had so much fun with it. And you can hear now like a couple of my takeaways from that. I think you can just hear the energy in my voice, in fact.
Today's question was an absolute banger. Delight is jumping over puddles, the perfect drop, laughing with a friend, chocolate cake, getting my headphones to work, a digger, like a huge digger, digging up the road, Holiday by the Jonas Brothers and Jimmy Fallon. Like, not even ashamed about it. Oh, and like the perfect sweet orange, like, you know, when you bite into an orange and it's juicy and sweet and actually good and all giving, like grapefruit. Overrated, underrated, I don't know, delightful.
And then finally on day 5, I asked myself, what would kindness look like today?
Okay, so final walk of the week. I actually found the question annoying because I was like, I don't really want to answer a question now. I want to consume more content because I'd been reading a book before that had given me lots of energy, and I was like, I just want to do that. But then I was like, no, we said we're going to do this. I started answering the question. And I realised like actually part of that was like what I'd just done is just sit and let myself read for half an hour. But then the question felt quite limiting, so I stretched it out to like, where can I see kindness around me? Seeing people holding hands and seeing people giving that kindness of just paying their full attention to somebody and really listening, or all those like tiny kindnesses. And I think it's really nice to be reminded that you're surrounded by that. It's been good asking the questions, to be honest. I have definitely seen an uplift or an engagement in my mood as I've been doing it.
And again, it had a similar wave to the Advent Calendar one, but with a slight theme. And there was definite goodness in there. And I guess overall, my takeaway would be that I did find that questions could lift my energy and shift my mood. It was really interesting to notice that I didn't actually really need an answer or one solid answer to those questions. Just asking the question was enough. But it also prompted me to realize that maybe not all questions are created equal, and perhaps we need to find a way to explore what questions work for us and how that works. And I've been thoughtful about this idea of open questions versus closed questions and what they might offer us, in that actually an open and expansive question can allow more space for us to fill, but also it can allow us more space to worry. And so having the right amount of constraint in that question can be an interesting one to play around with. But I think a question we can maybe figure out is, what would it look like if we practice and explore what questions work best for us, and how we can use those in relations to ourselves and our life planning and the way that we just live our day to day, and also in the way that we connect with other people, and connect with content and everything that is out in the world. Thinking through this, like, that prompted me to have this thought about, could questions be a source of power for us? And I watched this TikTok recently where this woman was talking about how when she reads a book, she assumes the author is talking directly to her. It's like they're having a conversation. And as a result, she writes notes in the margin. Like, her notes in her books that she's reading aren't just the way like I keep notes where I like underline a quote and I'm like, oh, this is great, love this quote. She'll underline the stuff that she doesn't agree with, and she'll write questions back to the author, or she'll pose this counter argument of saying, hey, I don't agree with that, or I see this differently. And it dawned on me as I was engaging with that of like how powerful that concept is, especially in the world that we all live in now, where we have an overexposure to information. There is so much content going on, which made me think, I wonder if we could approach content like that and question it, not to question its validity or whether like it was built to be a well-meaning piece of content or built to really be an information share, or if there's any manipulation going on, or all of that. I mean, that is a question to ask, of course, but just even in the content of like, oh, do I agree with that? Or is that how I see this thing? Or, oh, what would I do it like that? How would I have done that? And that is not something I'd ever thought about before. So it was really exciting to kind of get this idea of, actually, I need to be reading the books I'm reading, but in conversation with the author, because I think when we step into the conversation, we give ourselves power to change our perspective of it, power to perhaps do something differently, power to maybe interact with either the person that that information is coming from, or that wider conversation that maybe that information is about, and share our opinion. And rather than just becoming overwhelmed passive consumers of everything, we start to move into being active in the conversation, and maybe that will funnel our creativity out from that space, because we start to ask questions of those things and understand our opinion of them. And from there, we can react, we can create something in reaction, we can just react with a comment, but all the way of that scale from I start to understand what I think to I'm going to create a piece of art or work that is in contrast to this, that shares my perspective on this. I found that really energizing. I don't know about you. I would love to hear what you think of that concept, and if that's something that you already do, because it's a practice that I want to start. So if you've got any tips, like please share them. But it just made me think more and more that questions are really powerful. They are our connectors. They give us this power and sense of voice. They give us a direction, but also a boundary. They give us permission to explore, to be curious, to wonder, to be ourselves. Why the hell are we not asking them more? When did we stop asking questions? And I've been really thoughtful about this, because I obviously spend a lot of time with a young child. I say obviously, you might not know that I'm a mum, I have a young child, and we spend a lot of time together. It's great, I'm very lucky. And he is asking questions all of the time, And he doesn't even have that much language yet. So I can only assume the questions that are going on in his head that he hasn't been able to fully articulate. And I thought about why we stopped doing that. And the reasons I can only think, and if you have any opinions on this, please share as well, are one, we stopped because we think we should know. We think we should have the answers there, and we don't want to look stupid for asking questions that we should know the answer to. We want to appear educated, we want to appear smart, we want to appear in a certain way, and asking questions or too many questions about a thing might sabotage that sense of identity, that sense of knowledge that we should have as an adult. We also, and we don't want to look stupid to question something that we think everybody else understands. There's that kind of age or belief, right, that if you're asking the question, so probably so many other people are also asking that question, but nobody just says it because they don't want to look stupid. But I also think there's a sense of we stop ourselves asking questions because we maybe feel like we're challenging somebody else, and we don't want to challenge our friends or our family or our boss, or we don't feel comfortable to challenge the status quo. And I think that's why art and creativity has this draw to it, because it not only provides us a space to explore, but it provides us a space to question in a way that we maybe feel isn't quite so directly challenging of the thing in front of us, but does still allow us to say, like, hey, I don't see the world like that. This is how I see the world. What do you think of that? Because this is in contrast to what I'm being shown. And all of that, I guess, feels uncomfortable, right? It feels uncomfortable to look stupid or feel like we look stupid. It feels uncomfortable to feel like we don't fit in because we don't know or understand the answers to that. Or it feels uncomfortable to feel like we're challenging people, especially if we live in the camp of maybe being more conflict avoidant, I guess is maybe the word I'm looking for. But wherever you sit on that spectrum, asking questions feels like it becomes harder. And the only way I can think to change that is to practice. It's like with anything, the more you do it, the more you integrate it, the more it feeds into your life. And I'm currently working through Syllabus. I don't know if you know this book. It's an awesome, I guess in some ways, creative, like artist way alternative. But really early on in the book, and I'll try and get a photo of it, she talks about drawing straight lines, and the only way that you learn to draw straight lines is by continuing to draw straight lines, and you kind of like integrate the straight lines, I guess. The only way to understand this is by making things. Thinking about it, theorizing about it, chatting about it will not get you there. And that idea, which I could just extrapolate on forever, I feel sums up this approach to using questions as a tool. But like, to get good, to find useful questions, we actually need to practice them. And I have this awesome little map. It was a gift from a friend, so I can't even tell you where to source it. But it talks all around this idea of asking questions, and they reiterate in it. The authors are, I can tell you, so it was written by a couple of people called Robbie Dale and Tina Bernstein. And what they write in this is, just as questions come in all shapes and sizes, answers do too. And in order to benefit as much as possible from the answers you get, you have to know what to do with them. And the only way to get really comfortable with that is practice. Which I think sounds great, but it's like, how do we actually do this? How do we actually show up and practice? And I think one way is to think about our resolutions and think about them more in the shape of questions and what they might be. Another way is to practice in small ways, and some ways you could start sparking some of this, for example, is the next time you have a spare minute to sit down and just look around you and pick 5 objects and ask as many questions as you can about those objects in the time that you have. Or to try the experiment that I did, where you pick a question and you take that question out for a walk, or you take that question out for a journal, if walking isn't available to you or easy for you to do. And just go and allow yourself to see what answers come up when you do, and also what questions you enjoy doing that with. One thing I also really love doing is asking a question and then just free writing or sketching answers to it, like letting my hand move in different ways. and see what comes out, like a really kind of abstract approach to question asking. Or also, like, what if we tried that idea from the TikToker who I will link down below because I can't remember her name off the top of my head. So I'm very sorry to you because your content is super valuable and very cool. Where we just start having conversations with the content that we're consuming, even if it's just like the next TikTok story or the next Instagram reel, or maybe it's this podcast that you're listening and watching to, and whether you comment back to me or comment back to the person, whoever content you're engaging with, or you just write a couple of notes, or the questions that come up for you. I think that's a practice that I'm going to try taking forward, or maybe you do it with the book that you're reading tonight. If you do this already, please share your tips with us. Please share your tips of how you go about this, or any good questions that you found. And the other idea I had was like, what if we could gift each other questions? Like, what would that look like? Because a good question, I think, is really a gift to ourselves, to explore new ground, to open us up to curiosity. But it's also a great gift for somebody else, to be like, what do you see? Like, to help them open their perspective. Because I don't know about you, but one of my favorite things when I sit down with a friend is if they ask a question that I would never have asked, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is an awesome question. Yes, please. I don't even know where to start with that. And I hope that this can be a space that we're providing questions for each other. So if you have any good questions, please let me know. But even just thinking about questions as a gift gives me a bit of energy, and I hope gives you a bit of inspiration to think about what questions you could gift yourself, or what questions you might gift somebody else. I want this podcast to be a space to explore questions. So I thought I would share some of the questions that I want to explore this year on the podcast, to give you an idea if you will just want to hang out. Like, I'd love to hang out this year. Here are some of the stuff that I would love to figure out with you if we can. So if you're up for being like coming to the Blanket Fort with me every couple of weeks, probably every 3 weeks realistically, and diving into some of these topics together and figuring it out, that would be awesome. So this year for me, the questions that have been coming up have kind of dropped into a couple of different categories. And one is all around simplicity and what is enough, and decentering productivity as the sense of self-worth or value in the world, and how we negotiate that need and desire for rest with a pushing current of the outside world to do and achieve and strive and push harder. And like, what does that actually look like? Because I kind of want to run away to the woods and live like a monk, but also that doesn't really fit my life conditions, and I'm not sure it would actually make my life simpler. So I'm keen to explore what do those questions look like when you are deep in the current culture and the current society, and do engage with that on a daily, regular basis. The other area I want to explore is this idea of connection, and connection to self, connection to community. Like, how can I be a better villager? What does it look like for us to become better villagers, to step into communion with each other? And also our connection to place. Like, how does that play out living seasonally? What does it look like to connect to the nature around us? What does it feel like to be living from the sense of place in which you are living from? I'm really keen to explore that, because for me, there's something in the groundingness that is there, and I'm really intrigued as to what might come up when we explore that. And then the final topic area is silliness, because I've seen a lot around whimsy recently, and it was dawned on me that whimsy is kind of like, if wonder and silliness have a love child, that is what whimsy would be. And I want to explore that in general. Let's talk about the whole family tree, silliness, play, whimsy, wonder, all of that stuff. Yes, please, to more of that, like doubling down on that. But also, like, what if silliness was sacred, or the thing that's going to save the world? Like, how can we look at things that might feel silly and keep them silly, but also give them the importance of the thing that might help us do the stuff that we want to do? They're the questions that I'm kind of gifting myself this season, and I would love to sit down and explore with you. But I guess the most important question is, what are you interested in? Like, what question are you exploring this year? What question is begging you to be asked? I would love to hear your response to that. You can get in contact with me, you can reach out to me on Instagram. I'm there on TikTok. I'm there on YouTube. I hear in the comments on Spotify in the question chat. Like, I would love to hear what question you are asking this year. What are the big interesting questions for you? And maybe we can explore some of those together on the podcast as well. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited about 2026. I don't know what it's going to bring. I have no idea where we're going to get to by the end of the season. And I'm trying to embrace the magic of that. I'm trying to embrace that no straight road and instead just enjoy the surprise of what will come up as we do it. So thank you so much for watching. I will be back in 3 weeks, but in the meantime, happy growing. Doing this. I can't think what I was going to say anymore. That's so annoying.